everyone knows you after you did the Big Scott High School donation. Yeah. So what was kind of your backstory before you got into doing that big action that's going to change the lives of many?
Sure. Well, I grew up here in Toledo. Public school kid here in Toledo, and went to Ottawa Hills, your rival school.
Yes.
We play you in a lot of sports in Maumee Valley, and I loved growing up here. I had a great upbringing. I had great. My parents weren't wealthy, but they were educated, and they placed a high priority on education. So I went to college. I went to Bucknell University in Pennsylvania. And then I worked for 2 years in New York City and Wall Street. I hated every minute of it. Every day consecutively was the worst day of my life. And it was because I didn't connect with the people I was working with. I didn't like them. I didn't trust them. So when you go off in the working world, you're already in the working world, but when you go off somewhere and you're working as an anchor at a big station, make sure you like the people you work with.
Yes.
That was a big lesson for me. And then I started 3 companies. I had about 4,000 employees over 17 years, created about $4 billion in shareholder value, took 2 companies public, and but throughout that time I was the chairman of the board of the largest homeless aid agency in Chicago, spending a lot of time working on issues around the damage done related to the war on drugs. My wife also started a charity helping homeless women, single mothers. And I just became super enamored with poverty and the intersection between poverty and education. And how do we solve poverty or alleviate poverty by providing equal education to our kids? And so I've been working on initiatives like this for the better part of the last decade. But with this mayor, Mayor Kapsakavich, who's just done such an awesome job here, he lured me back to Toledo. And we decided to work together on some initiatives, including the one at Scott High School.
Well, that's a great backstory, by the way. I like that. So, kind of what inspired you to give back?
Well, there's the biblical saying, to those who much is given, much is expected, right? And I truly do believe in that. But I got to tell you, I speak tomorrow to the student body at Ottawa Hills High School, and I'm going to tell them what I tell a lot of people. It's weird. The more I gave, the wealthier I became, And so the more I gave of myself, the more I sacrificed of myself, the more money I gave away, the wealthier I became. And that seems to some people counterintuitive. Like, if you're giving all your money away, you aren't saving it. How can you become wealthier? But I just learned through experience that, like, the more giving I was, the more time I spent helping other people. Call it karma, call it whatever you want. The better I felt about myself, the better the community felt about me. And the more successful I became in my life. So, I like giving. It's what fulfills me. What makes me happy. It's what I retired at the age of 40 to do, is to give my resources and time away to help others.
Well, my next question was going to be, what would be your message to people who would like to do what you did? But I think that just answered all those questions.
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry, I'm a little long-winded. I apologize.
I love long-winded.
Cut me off if you need to.
Oh, no. So how do you think this money will change these students' lives?
I've heard so many stories. Even today, I was on the phone with Chris Rowland, the gentleman who was profiled in the CBS piece, who's an interesting guy for maybe you to profile, by the way. It is a dramatic shift. It's a change in their cultural norms. For example, let me give you an example. A teacher who was teaching English at Scott High School 6 months ago may have said to a student, what are you going to do next year? And now she says, where are you going to college next year? Just think about that little change. She changed 6 words in what she said to a student, from what are you going to do next year, to where are you going to college? Because now college is an expectation. And that changes people's mindsets, that changes people's cultural norms, that changes communities. And so I'm hearing all these stories about lives that are being changed. It's my hope and my goal that these students and their parents persist through their education. I don't just want them to go to college. I want them to stay in and get that piece of paper at the end, right? But I think we're changing mindsets here.
Yes.
And not just at Scott High School. I think we're changing mindsets in Toledo.
Yes.
I think we're letting people know that this is possible. Like, we can do this here. And so it's been pretty exciting for me.
And, one thing I noticed after you did that was you're not just changing the mindset or those students' lives, you're also changing what their futures could hold when they have kids, or when they begin to think about college. So I think it's it's changing, it's stopping that one generation of, well, I don't know if I can do this. Now, you can do this, you can do that. So I think that was definitely a great impact for that.
And hopefully they come back. They do. Part of this is a lesson, right? And I'm always trying to teach, and not in a condescending way, but I'm always trying to teach. Part of this is a lesson of, like, if you look at what I did, I came back to the community that gave me the tools and the assets to go off and be successful in the world. And if you go off and you go to Ohio State University and you become successful, you have a responsibility, and I use that word a lot. Yes. You have a responsibility to come back to your community that gave you the tools and the assets and give back to. And so a lot of people have talked to me about that, but that is part of the lesson here. Like, this is your responsibility to give back.
I love that. I'm just sitting here in shock. I'm just like, man.
I'm no Brad Pitt, but.
Oh no. So did the location of the school that you chose, did it, affect your decision on where you were going to give the money, the location?
It wasn't about the location. It was about, I remember, so when I was growing up in Ottawa Hills, in a rather insulated environment, mostly white, I remember that, I'm not going to say we made fun of the kids at Scott, because that's probably a little bit too far reaching, but we thought of the kids at Scott as not very well educated, because they were getting a deficient education, they were under-resourced, they were poor, and the fact is that 25 years later, not much has changed. And so when I called the mayor not too long ago, 2 months ago, and I said, I want to do this, there was only one school to do it at, in my opinion, was Toledo Scott, Jesup W Scott High School, because it was the one that has the most opportunity to gain from this, and the most disadvantage from a student and a family perspective, and the one that I think is like, it's just changed the least over the years. So I wanted to go, as I said in my CBS interview, if you want to make change, you got to go to the epicenter of inequity, and that area around Scott High School is truly, in this community, the epicenter of inequity.
Well, that action that you did was definitely setting an example for our community, but you're not just setting an example in one way, you're also setting an example through an organization you started called HOPE. So what is that organization?
So HOPE stands for Helping Our Population Educate. And my mission with the mayor was to make sure that not just one class of Toledo, high school students and their parents go to college for free, but that every Toledo high school student get post-secondary education for free. And by the way, that may not be college. Not everyone is fit for college, or it's not the right path for everybody. It could be trade school, which is awesome for some of these students. Some of these kids can go off and get welding certificates and make $75,000 a year, 2 years out. But we want to give these students the means, the confidence, the self-esteem, and the knowledge that they can go and get this post-secondary degree without being saddled with a ton of debt, which is just another societal inequity. Your white suburban peers go to college and they come out with zero debt, and so they can be a little bit more entrepreneurial, a little bit more nimble. But the African American, Latino, urban poor students who are under-resourced are saddled with a ton of debt. And so they got to work this job they don't really want to be in because they got to pay the college debt off. So it's this whole virtual cycle of inequity. And so I'm just excited that we got to do it at Scott, and I think it was the right place to do it. But hope is my hope for hope, helping our population educate, is that we can do the same thing with all Toledo public school students. That is our goal. It's going to require $100 million. It's going to require a lot of other people who are like me, who think it's their responsibility to give back. So it won't be easy, but it's important.
I think it's also important because that money, we are starting to lack those trade jobs and young people that are, interested in those jobs. But I think, they're definitely going to probably take up more interest just because they have the resources to do it. Pete, I thank you for joining me.
Jaden, thank you so much. I appreciate it.